I've lived in Tower 4 for a little over 9 years now. It's one of those government-owned high-rises on West Laurel Avenue, tucked between the two fenced basketball courts and the elevated subway tracks. You've probably passed it without ever looking up. 10 floors of weather-stained concrete and narrow balconies where people dry their clothes or throw old furniture over the rail when the super doesn't answer. My unit's on the 6th floor, 6B. The walls are thin enough to hear kids crying next door, and the pipes moan when anyone takes a hot shower, but the rent stayed low, and nobody bothers me if I mind my business. That morning started like most do. My ankle monitor had fully charged overnight, still blinking green, which meant the system didn't flag anything. I'm technically still finishing the last 2 months of my home confinement from that parole violation last year. Nothing serious, just bad timing and a missed check-in. I wasn't exactly innocent, but I wasn't what the courts made me out to be either. I got up around 9, later than usual, and shuffled into the kitchen in socks to boil water for instant coffee. Outside the window, a garbage truck was rumbling past, stopping too long under each building like it was short-staffed. The driver leaned out of the window at one point and shouted something in Spanish to a woman in a housecoat chasing the truck with a half-torn trash bag. Same chaos as always. The radiator had been hissing all night again, and the kitchen light flickered for the first 30 seconds before settling. I fried 2 eggs in a cracked pan. Both yolks split as they hit the oil. Didn't really care. I wasn't in a rush. My cousin Dre had texted late the night before. Something about passing through to pick up his hoodie he left the last time he crashed at my place. I figured he'd come by before noon if he didn't get distracted selling vape cartridges to the high school kids outside the bodega. He's got his hustle. We all do. Around 10, I scrolled through the local news on my phone, while half listening to the AM radio I keep near the stove. Just background noise, mostly traffic and weather, but something in the feed caught my eye. A short post from a local reporter about some kind of containment exercise happening downtown. I clicked through. Nothing substantial, just vague phrases like public safety drill and limited disruption expected. A few people in the comments were already calling it BS, saying their bus routes were being cancelled with no notice, and one woman posted a blurry video from near City General Hospital showing 4 white CDC-style trucks parked against the sidewalk with hazard lights on. That was the first moment I paused. I don't usually pay attention to rumors, but when government trucks show up near the hospitals, and the officials won't say why, it gives you that feeling like someone knows more than they're letting on. Still, it was easy to brush off. We've had anthrax drills before. We've had sirens go off for weather that never came. And nobody around here ever trusts the first version of anything they're told. I tossed the phone back on the counter and sat down to eat, flipping through daytime cable like it meant anything. The first real sign that things weren't normal came at 10:37 a.m. My phone lit up with one of those alert tones that bypass the volume settings. It blared so loud I dropped my fork. The screen said, "Emergency alert. Local shelter-in-place test in effect. Do not be alarmed. Citywide." I read it twice. Seemed harmless. Just a drill. Maybe part of that same hospital thing. But then, I remembered we'd never done anything like that before. Not citywide. Not involving entire districts. Not since 9/11. A few minutes later, Dre showed up banging on the door like he was being chased. I unlocked it and he pushed inside fast, sweating and scanning the hallway behind him like he was expecting someone to follow. He didn't say anything for the first 30 seconds. Just paced, agitated. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and clipped. He said he saw police tape up by Grand Avenue and a perimeter being formed near the emergency entrance to City General. Said some people were filming on their phones and then getting told to leave by men in full Tyvek suits. I asked him if it could have been a hazmat drill or maybe a chemical spill. He shook his head. Said he heard a man screaming inside the hospital lot and no one helped him, just left him there. Then Dre said something weird. He told me he saw someone biting a pedestrian near the bus stop by Lincoln Pharmacy. Not mugging, not punching, biting, and the guy didn't even try to fight back. He just stood there like his body had stopped listening to him. I didn't believe him, not completely. Dre exaggerates. He's seen too many horror movies. I poured him some coffee and told him to chill, but he kept checking the blinds and asked if he could stay a few hours. just to see if things calmed down. That's when I started scrolling again. This time I checked Twitter, not the local news. The hashtags were already trending. City general outbreak, containment zone, do not go outside. Most of it looked like nonsense, but every so often, a post would stand out. A video showing people running from something near a subway platform. A nurse writing that she was locked in an OR with 3 bodies and no answers. Another post claimed someone reanimated in a hallway. The word choice was strange. Reanimated. I closed the app. It felt like a joke that too many people were in on. By noon, the hallway outside was louder than usual. Someone dragged a laundry cart up the stairs. A few doors opened and slammed shut. I heard Mr. Leone, the building superintendent, yelling down from the second-floor landing. Something about securing the front lobby and not letting anyone else in. I looked out the peephole just in time to see him dragging a folding metal barricade across the entry hall. He had gloves on. Not work gloves. Latex. His face was pale and tight. Whatever was happening, he believed it. And Leone doesn't panic easy. He's been through 3 building fires, 2 break-ins, and once knocked out a burglar with a wrench. I stayed inside for the rest of the day. Dre kept going from window to window. The sirens got worse. Not fast-moving ones like you'd hear during a car chase. These were slow, almost methodical. They stopped, started, then started again. Ambulances without headlights, cop cars without drivers. At one point, around 3 p.m., someone 2 floors down started shouting out their window. A long, desperate sound, like they were calling someone who wasn't answering. The shouting ended suddenly. We didn't hear anything after that. Just before sundown, the second alert came. Louder this time. Every phone, every TV, even the smart speaker on top of my fridge repeated it in perfect sync. Emergency alert. Shelter in place. Do not attempt to leave your building. Quarantine zone initiated. Stay indoors. Await further instruction. And I thinks it wasn't a test. By 6, I pushed the refrigerator up against the apartment door. It wasn't the strongest barricade, but it gave me something to focus on. I turned off all lights except for the one above the stove. Dre pulled the couch near the window and sat facing it with a crowbar across his lap. We didn't talk much, just listened. At some point, I think we both realized the phones had stopped buzzing. No updates, no service, just dead silence across the line. Outside, something brushed against the fire escape. Could have been a bird, could have been a loose tarp, but we both froze. The rhythm of city noise was broken, no more car horns, no more music from passing SUVs, no laughter from the corner boys, just the occasional howl of wind through broken windows and a strange dragging sound echoing up from the alley. The silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like something waiting, something holding its breath with us. I stayed up through the night. Dre dozed off at some point in the early hours, slumped on the couch with the crowbar resting across his chest like it was strapped there. I didn't bother trying to wake him when the tapping started again around 4:30. It came from down the hallway, slow and irregular, like the person, or thing, doing it wasn't in a rush. I crept to the door and put my eye to the peephole. The hallway was dim, lit by that weak amber glow from the emergency light above the stairwell. Nothing moved, but the tapping didn't stop. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. Eventually, the tapping faded, followed by a wet, dragging sound that made me pull the fridge tighter against the frame. I kept staring through the peephole even after it was quiet, just in case something stepped back into view. The sun came up slow. Through the blinds, I could tell it was overcast, and the light coming in wasn't strong enough to give me any comfort. It only helped me see how cluttered the kitchen had become. Dishes still in the sink from 2 days ago. A box of cereal turned over on the counter. My ankle monitor charging cable coiled like a snake next to a cracked phone screen. I still hadn't received a single notification since the emergency alert. When Dre woke up, he looked around like he'd just remembered where he was. He asked if I heard anything during the night. I didn't answer right away, just nodded slowly and pointed at the door. He didn't ask again. We decided to do a sweep of the apartment. Not for intruders, but for supplies. If we were going to be locked inside, we needed to know exactly what we had and how long it could last. Between the two of us, We counted 6 bottles of water, 2 half-full gallons in the fridge, and an unopened 24-pack of store brand. We had 3 loaves of white bread, a bag of dry rice, a dozen canned soups, and a dented jar of peanut butter. In the freezer, 2 bags of frozen vegetables, 4 burritos, and a tray of chicken thighs that were already half thawed. No gas stove, just electric, but the power still worked, for now. Bathroom was stocked with 1 unopened toilet paper pack and 3 bars of soap. Dre had a stash of wipes and painkillers in his backpack, plus 2 asthma inhalers. I found a flashlight under the sink with weak batteries, a roll of duct tape, and a box cutter I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to last maybe 5, 6 days if we stretched it right. That's when it sank in. We weren't waiting for things to calm down anymore. We were trying to figure out how long we could outlast whatever this was. Around 9:30, someone pounded on a door down the hall. Not like before. This time it was fast, frantic, and filled with panic. I heard a man shouting, something like, "Let me in, please." The voice cracked halfway through like his throat was torn up. Then I heard another voice, a woman, older, screaming, "Go away," from behind her door. Then came a sound I don't know how to describe properly, like wet rope slapping tile. Then a crash, then nothing. I didn't dare open the door. I didn't even approach the peephole. I just stood still, heart not racing exactly, but refusing to calm. Dre sat at the edge of the couch, both hands on the crowbar, staring at the floor. After that, the building got quieter. But it wasn't the kind of quiet that came with relief. It was the kind that crept in when everyone around you was hiding. The elevator hadn't moved since yesterday. The hallway lights flickered in a steady rhythm like they were running off backup power. I tried flipping on the television, hoping maybe the city channels were still up. All I got was static. Same with the FM radio. Just static and the occasional garbled voice, like someone was trying to talk through a mouthful of gravel. That's when I started pacing. I don't usually pace. I don't like wasting energy like that. But I couldn't sit still. I kept thinking about the emergency alert. Why no updates had come through? No reverse 911 calls. No instructions from the city. If it had been a gas leak or something like that, we would have had hazmat teams, trucks in the street, maybe even National Guard setting up tents. But there was nothing. No one was coming. At noon, I peeked through the blinds toward the street. What I saw stayed with me. A city bus, the M28 line, was parked crooked halfway into the intersection. No driver, no passengers. Front windshield cracked like it had hit something and kept moving. Blood on the front bumper. Not splattered, smeared, like someone had rolled across it. Next to the bus, a pair of shoes sat in the middle of the crosswalk. One upright, one sideways. I looked further down and saw someone standing near the entrance to the bodega. Just standing, not moving. It was a woman, or had been. Long, matted hair, wearing a yellow puffer jacket torn open at the shoulder. Her head lolled forward slightly, as if she was dozing off while standing up. But she didn't fall. She just stood there, swaying slightly. When a gust of wind pushed a plastic bag down the street, she didn't turn to look. Didn't even blink. I pulled back from the window. Whatever was out there, it wasn't normal. It wasn't some drug rage or street fight. That woman wasn't right. She wasn't reacting to the world like a person should. I felt a sick sort of certainty in my gut. Whatever was spreading, it was in our neighborhood now. Mid-afternoon, we heard noise from upstairs. Not footsteps, thuds, heavy rhythmic thuds, like someone was dropping furniture on the floor over and over. Then the sound of glass breaking. We looked at each other but didn't speak. Dre motioned to the ceiling and mouthed, 7B. I remembered the guy who lived there. Mr. Yates, ex-military, kept to himself. Built like a tank. If he was still up there, he wasn't doing well. Just after 4, someone started dragging something down the stairwell. The sound came and went in intervals, like whoever it was kept stopping to rest. Metal scraping concrete. Something big. I didn't open the door. Dre pressed his ear to the peephole for a few minutes, and then stepped back, shaking his head. He didn't say what he saw. I didn't ask. We ate cold soup from the can that night. Neither of us wanted to risk drawing attention by microwaving anything. Sound felt dangerous now. Even boiling water seemed too loud. We chewed quietly, listening for movement, for voices, for any sign that someone in the building was still acting like a human being. But we heard none. Just before lights out, Dre finally spoke again. He asked, in a low voice, "What if the power goes next?" It hadn't even crossed my mind. We were already acting like the grid would hold, like water and electricity were permanent fixtures of life here. But we were 10 stories up. No power meant no water pumps, no elevators, no lights, no fridge, no heat. I told him we'd deal with it if it came to that. He nodded, but I could see the worry behind his eyes. We were both playing strong, but neither of us believed the worst was over. The real fear wasn't what had happened yet, it was what hadn't. The building hadn't been breached, not yet, but we could feel it pressing in from the edges, from the street, from the stairwell, from the floor above. That night, I moved the fridge further against the door and taped the locks shut. Not that it would do much against whatever could kick through wood, but it helped me feel like I was doing something. Dre slept with one eye open, crowbar tucked under his arm. I stayed by the window, watching shadows stretch across the far side of the avenue. One of them moved different from the rest. It dragged its feet. The others, if there were others, moved slower, but this one looked like it had a purpose. Like it was waiting for something. It stood in front of a burned-out sedan for hours, never sitting down, never adjusting its posture. Just upright, still and wrong. The sky turned pink and then grey again, before it finally wandered off toward the overpass. I only stopped watching it when my eyes started to sting from not blinking. When Dre stirred, it was already morning. We hadn't said anything yet, but I think we both knew the walls were closing in. Not just metaphorically, but literally. Whatever was happening outside wasn't going away. The silence had a weight to it now. Even the pigeons on the balcony were gone. No more flapping wings. No more rattling trash lids. The building didn't feel like a place we lived in anymore. It felt like a container. After brushing my teeth in the dark bathroom and splashing my face with cold tap water, I stood in the kitchen with my hand on the doorknob for a long time. Dre sat on the couch behind me, watching but not saying anything. I think he knew what I was thinking. I hadn't stepped outside since the emergency alert. The last time I even cracked the door was Tuesday morning. Now it was Thursday. I needed to know if we could leave. If the lockdown was a bluff or if the system was still watching us. I moved the fridge slowly, inch by inch, just enough to open the door wide enough to squeeze through. The hallway outside looked exactly the same. Dim amber light from the emergency fixture, water stains on the ceiling tiles, trash near the stairwell, but it felt different. The air smelled faintly of burnt plastic, and the sound of my own breathing filled the corridor. I stepped over the threshold and paused. The atmosphere outside the apartment felt heavier somehow, like the air was thicker just from being out of that sealed space. I kept walking, down past the 5th floor, then the 4th, one slow step at a time. When I reached the ground level, I cracked open the main lobby door and stepped outside for the first time in days. The first thing that hit me was the air. Not clean, exactly, but fresher than the stale, recycled apartment air. It carried the scent of rain-drenched asphalt, old smoke, and something sharp I couldn't place. The sky overhead was grey and stretched thin. For a moment, I just stood there and listened. But then, before I even reached the edge of the walkway, the ankle monitor chirped. At first, it was just a soft beep, like a microwave timer. But then, the LED strip on the side began pulsing red. The tone changed. Higher, faster. 3 sharp beeps, a pause, then 3 more. It was loud enough to echo off the brick walls around the courtyard. It didn't matter if the street was empty. Anyone listening would have heard it. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran back through the entrance, taking the stairs 2 at a time. The second I stepped across my apartment threshold, the sound stopped. The light on the band turned green again, calm and indifferent like nothing had ever happened. Dre looked up from the couch, one eyebrow raised, halfway between concern and disbelief. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was. The rules might be gone, but the leash was still working. "Guess that answers that," I said, trying to sound casual. But the truth was heavier. The system still had power. The network was still active. Somebody somewhere still thought it was necessary to keep me in this box. Either that, or the tech was running on automation with no human oversight left. Either way, I wasn't getting out without triggering alarms. And if things were really breaking down out there, I didn't want to draw attention to us, human or otherwise. That's when we started seriously talking about supplies. I told Dre we needed to make a run while we still had the option. The lights were still on, the store might still be open, and we had a little cash stashed in a drawer under the TV stand. About 300 in 20s, mostly rolled up bills from my side jobs before the bracelet went on. If there were ATMs still working, we'd clean them out. But we couldn't wait. We needed everything. Food, water, batteries, tape, whatever was left. Dre was hesitant. He kept glancing at the window like he expected to see something staring back. But I told him plain, if we waited another day, we'd be down to tap water and dry rice. The building was too quiet, the neighbors too silent. No one was sharing anymore. No more knocks for sugar, no more arguments through the walls. Just silence and the occasional cough from somewhere above. Eventually, he agreed. I gave him my hoodie, stuffed the cash in an inside pocket, and showed him the folding knife in the kitchen drawer. He took it without comment. The plan was simple. Go out through the west stairwell, take the side alley past the fence, hit the bodega on 181st if it was open. If not, keep going toward the gas station off Grand. If that was closed, loop back. No hero moves. Just buy, grab, and return. Before he left, I reminded him not to answer anyone calling from windows or asking for help. That sounds cold, but things had changed. People don't act right when they're scared, and desperation makes people stupid. If someone saw him with supplies, they'd follow. Or worse, I told him to move fast, stay quiet, and not get involved in anything he didn't understand. He nodded, pulled his hood up, and walked out the door without looking back. The moment he left, the apartment felt twice as empty. I moved the fridge back into place and taped it down again. Then I turned off all the lights and sat near the peephole, not watching for Dre, but watching for anything that wasn't him. I waited there for hours, just listening. The building didn't make a sound. Even the radiator had gone cold. At some point, maybe an hour after he left, I thought I heard footsteps from above. Slow, heavy ones. Then something metallic scraped against the floor. It didn't sound like a chair being dragged. It sounded like a pipe or something, long being pulled sideways. I thought about going to the hallway again, just to listen better, but I didn't move. My legs felt heavy. My body knew better than to investigate what didn't announce itself. More time passed. No knocks, no alerts, just stillness. I tried the TV again, flipping through the static, hoping maybe some local feed had kicked back on. Nothing. Then I tried the radio. One station. Just one. Somewhere around 1620 on the AM dial. It was faint, barely audible over the buzz, but there was a man's voice repeating something. Remain inside. All outer boroughs under containment. If you are in a secure structure, do not attempt to relocate. Reinforcements are. Public transport is non-operational. Infection signs include. Then it cut. No looping, no return. Just silence again. I stared at the dial for a while, not sure if I had imagined it. When Dre came back, the sun was already starting to set. I didn't hear him on the stairs. He knocked lightly on the door in a pattern we'd agreed on, and I opened up fast, dragging the fridge just far enough to let him slide in sideways. He looked like he'd run 2 miles and crawled half of it. His hoodie was ripped at the elbow and stained at the sleeve, but I didn't see blood. He dropped the duffel bag onto the floor without saying a word and locked the door behind him. I helped him unpack. 2 jugs of water, 8 cans of beans, a box of protein bars, 4 packs of batteries, rubbing alcohol, bandages, 2 packs of lighters, candles, ramen, bleach, plastic gloves, and a bundle of loose snack food. He said the bodega was open, barely. The owner stood behind the counter with a baseball bat, letting people in one at a time. Prices had tripled. Dre had to beg for change when our bills ran short, but the man didn't argue, said the phones had gone down early that morning and no shipments had come in since Tuesday. People were already starting to loot other stores. One guy tried to walk out with a case of Red Bull and got smacked in the face with a frying pan. Nobody helped him. On the way back, Dre said he passed a bus wrapped around a traffic light and 3 abandoned cop cars. All had their doors open. 2 still had blood inside. He didn't stick around. He ran the last few blocks. He didn't see anyone on our street except for one man standing by the mailbox. Not moving, just standing there, holding a package like he didn't know what it was. That night we ate quietly. No microwave, just cold beans and a protein bar. The sky outside was dimming fast, clouds low and swollen with smoke from somewhere to the south. I checked the radiator again. Still dead. The air had that stale quality that made your skin feel dusty. I thought about the man on the radio and what he'd said. About containment, about symptoms. But the message had been too short, too fragmented. We didn't know what to look for, what to avoid, or how much time we had. I lay on the floor near the front door that night, flashlight off, crowbar across my chest. Dre slept sitting up, legs sprawled under the coffee table. Every now and then I'd hear him mumble something, some half-dreamed phrase or curse, but he never woke fully. The building groaned a few times, old pipes shifting in cold walls, or maybe something brushing past an exterior vent, but nothing came up the stairwell, and no one knocked. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. The ankle monitor had to go. It had made sense at the start. There were still rules, still systems, still lines you couldn't cross without consequences. But that was 4 days ago, and no one had come to check on me. No patrols, no calls, no threats from probation. The network was still active, sure, but who was listening? Who was even left to care? I wasn't worried about another court date. I was worried about the fact that if we had to run, really run, I'd be the one slowing us down, beeping and blinking like a goddamn target. And even if I wanted to push the limits again, the noise would bring more than attention. It could bring whatever was dragging itself through the streets. I looked down at the monitor. Matte black plastic, zip-tied metal contacts on the inside. A sensor that could tell if I tried to tamper with it. The band was tight, snug just above my ankle bone. It hadn't moved in months. I'd stopped feeling it long ago, but now, every second it was there. It burned in the back of my mind. A symbol of control in a world that had lost control completely. I needed tools. Something strong enough to crack the housing, cut the strap, maybe even short out the circuit. I thought about the neighbor downstairs. Old man Ruben. Unit 4D. Retired mechanic. Former military maybe. But no one knew for sure. He kept to himself mostly. But he used to sell unregistered tools and other stuff out of the back of his storage closet. People said he had a shotgun in his kitchen and a snub-nosed revolver hidden in a cereal box above the fridge. It was an open secret. The kind people don't talk about until they need something and don't want to ask questions. More importantly, Ruben wasn't supposed to be home. A week ago, before all this, I'd overheard him in the hallway telling one of the younger guys that he was heading upstate for a VA appointment and staying with his sister in Rochester for a few days. He was the type to keep that plan. If he'd gotten out before the block shut down, that apartment would be empty, locked, but breakable. If we moved quiet, no one would know. And if he hadn't left, if he was still inside, then we'd know quickly. I didn't like the idea of robbing a man I shared walls with, but this wasn't about theft anymore. It was survival. I told Dre the plan around 8. He didn't look thrilled, but he didn't argue either. He understood the logic. I needed the monitor off. We needed more protection. And if things continued the way they were going, it wouldn't be long before other people in the building started thinking the same way. About food, weapons, escape. Better to act now while things were still quiet. We moved slow. I slid the fridge aside just enough to get the door open, then locked it again behind us. Dre carried the crowbar. I had a length of steel pipe from the old sink repair kit stuffed into my hoodie sleeve. The hallway on the 6th floor was still empty. Same cracked paint on the cinderblock walls. Same flickering light above the laundry chute. We crept down the stairs in silence, listening between each landing. 4th floor was quiet. No movement, no voices. We passed 4A and 4B without stopping. 4C had a scratch mark across the bottom of the door, like someone had dragged something sharp along it. a smear of something brown and dry near the knob. I didn't ask. Dre didn't mention it either. We reached 4D and stopped. The door was locked, as expected. Old-style deadbolt, plus a chain inside. I checked the peephole. Nothing visible. Dre put his ear to the wood and listened. He didn't say anything, but he didn't flinch either. We figured the apartment was empty. Still, we couldn't risk kicking it in and waking the whole floor. We needed to do this quiet. The lock wasn't complicated. Dre had learned a few tricks from his older brother, who used to steal scooters and strip bikes in the South Bronx. He pulled a tension wrench from his back pocket and a thin Allen key he'd bent into a hook shape. It took him about 2 minutes. When the bolt turned, I felt a ripple of tension roll down my spine. This wasn't just stealing. This was crossing a line we couldn't uncross. We stepped inside and closed the door behind us. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not death, just stale air, wood dust, old furniture, and grease from dinners that hadn't been made in a week. The apartment was darker than ours, curtains drawn, only a thin slit of sunlight coming through a bent blind in the kitchen. We moved carefully. Dre went toward the living room. I headed to the kitchen. I found the shotgun fast, tucked into a cabinet under the sink, wrapped in a trash bag with 2 boxes of shells beside it. 12 gauge, Mossberg, short barrel, pistol grip. The thing had dust on the receiver, but looked cleaned and oiled. No rust. I handed it to Dre without saying a word and started looking for the revolver. It was exactly where people said it would be. Top shelf, hidden inside an empty box of Raisin Bran. A 5-shot .38 snub-nose blackened steel with a cloth pouch of ammo rubber-banded to the side. I held it in my palm for a moment, feeling the weight, then tucked it into the back of my waistband. The toolbox was harder to find. It wasn't in the kitchen or bathroom. We finally spotted it in the back bedroom closet, buried under a pile of winter jackets and extension cords. Old red Craftsman box, heavy with layers of sockets, pliers, and a rotary tool that might still work if the battery wasn't dead. Dre carried that too, grunting slightly from the weight. We made one last pass through the apartment, grabbing canned food from the pantry, chili, spam, baked beans, corn, and 3 bottles of spring water under the sink. We didn't linger, didn't search every cabinet. The goal wasn't to clean the place out, just to get what we came for and leave before anything noticed. Back in our own apartment, we secured the door again and unpacked everything onto the kitchen floor. I laid the toolbox out carefully, selecting a mini Dremel with a carbide cutting wheel and a pair of heavy-duty snips. I sat on a chair, propped my leg up, and took a deep breath. I didn't ask Dre to help. If I fried my ankle, I'd only blame myself. I started with the snips, trying to weaken the strap without touching the wires. The outer band cracked after a few minutes. Then I switched to the Dremel. The wheel sparked against the inner metal, shrieking in the quiet kitchen. We winced with every noise, imagining someone, or something, hearing it outside. After 4 minutes, I smelled burnt plastic. The housing cracked. The light blinked red once, then it went dark. I dropped it onto the floor, panting lightly, sweat on my forehead. Dre picked it up with 2 fingers like it might still explode. We waited. 5 minutes passed. No sirens, no drones, no pounding boots. Nothing. Just the silence of a world that had already stopped watching. We sat there for a while with the busted ankle monitor between us, the broken shell of something that once meant authority. It didn't buzz, didn't spark, didn't even blink anymore. It was just a piece of melted plastic and shredded wiring on the linoleum floor, and it meant freedom, in a way I hadn't felt since the system put me on lockdown. But the weight that lifted was small compared to what settled in its place, because now there were no rules left at all, no more signals, no more safety lines, just whatever came next. We didn't make plans that night. We ate some of the beans we'd stolen from Ruben's kitchen and split one of the energy bars from Dre's earlier run. Neither of us said much. I think the adrenaline from breaking into someone else's apartment was still fading, and both of us felt the gravity of what we'd done. Even if the world was falling apart, there was something about opening someone else's locked door that didn't sit right. Still, neither of us brought it up again. The air was heavier that morning. It was harder to describe than feel, like the building was pressing inward slightly, like the walls had taken a breath and forgotten how to let it out. The hall outside our door smelled like wet drywall and old sweat, the kind that builds up when too many people stop opening windows. Dre suggested we wait a few more days before trying to leave for good. Neither of us liked the idea of walking out blind. The city might have locked down, but information was still key. If the lights were still on, that meant there was still power on the block, and if there was power, someone had to still be running systems somewhere. But our phones hadn't picked up signal since Wednesday, and the cell towers must have been cut or overloaded. Wireless was out across the board, but I remembered something that might give us an edge. There was a guy 3 doors down from us on the same floor. Carlos lived in 6E. I didn't know him well. Quiet, heavy-set, always wore headphones, worked tech support from home, never caused problems. I remembered seeing a mess of coaxial cables running under his door once, while the super was doing inspections. Rumor was he had wired internet with his own battery backup router and some kind of DSL line that ran through the wall. If his setup was still working, and if he wasn't dead or crazy, it might be the only way to see what was really going on beyond our block. I grabbed the revolver from the kitchen table and slipped it into my waistband before we stepped out. Dre took the shotgun again. We didn't plan on using them, but we weren't stupid. The hallway was too quiet. I knocked on Carlos's door the normal way, 3 times, just like we would on any other day. We waited. Nothing. I knocked again, softer this time, then leaned in and whispered his name. Still no response. We didn't want to break another door unless we had to. I leaned down and turned the knob gently, and to my surprise, it wasn't locked. Inside, the air was cold and stale, like the place hadn't been opened in days. We stepped in slowly. The lights were on barely, and the battery backup on his desk was still blinking green. His apartment looked untouched. No signs of a struggle, no mess. Just clean surfaces and 2 dirty coffee mugs sitting by the sink. A laptop sat on a fold-out table against the wall, with a thick Ethernet cord trailing to the corner of the room. Dre kept watch near the door while I stepped over and touched the mouse pad. The screen came to life. Windows login screen. No password prompt. Just a spinning circle and the word resuming. A good sign. I clicked through the browser. He had left his tabs open, mostly forums, a few Reddit threads, a YouTube stream that was now a dead link. But one tab was still refreshing. An emergency map feed from the NYC Office of Emergency Management. The server was still up. The map showed hot zones across the boroughs. Queens lit up red. Most of Brooklyn labeled as failed containment. Parts of the Bronx, especially near the hospitals and subway hubs, were marked with a new status. Isolation barrier compromised. No explanation. No timestamps. Just silent updates moving like clockwork. Another tab had a live text thread. Looked like it was from a private server. People trading information. Someone in Long Island said neighborhoods were barricading themselves. Another post said the East River bridges were wired with charges, possibly to stop foot traffic. Someone claimed to have seen helicopters being shot down. I didn't believe all of it, but the volume of reports from across the city told me one thing clearly. Whatever this was, it wasn't local, and it wasn't going away. Just as I tried to load a government update page, the screen went black. At first I thought the laptop had gone into sleep mode, but then the lights above us flickered and shut off completely. The hum of the fridge stopped. The emergency exit light at the end of the hallway glowed for a few seconds, then blinked out. The entire floor fell into sudden, suffocating darkness. We both froze. For almost 2 minutes, neither of us moved. I could hear Dre's breathing steady behind me. And somewhere in the building, maybe on the floor above us, a distant voice muttered something. It wasn't a scream, just a low, garbled sound, like someone talking to themselves in a room with no windows. We didn't wait. I unplugged the laptop, grabbed the battery backup, and we slipped out of Carlos's apartment with the door pulled shut behind us. The hallway was colder now. I felt the difference in my hands as we crept back to our door. Without lights, the building's warmth was already bleeding out. The power stayed off for most of the afternoon. We didn't waste the laptop's battery, just plugged it in once and watched the charge level hover at 67% before shutting it back down. There were too many things happening at once to process them all, but I couldn't stop thinking about that map. Whole districts marked off. hot zones swallowing streets, bridges possibly rigged for demolition. This wasn't a quarantine anymore, it was an abandonment. Around 5:30, the lights flickered back on. No warning, just a pop from the ceiling fixture and the hum of the fridge clicking back to life. Dre let out a quiet breath. I didn't feel relief. It was like someone flipping the switch just to remind us that we weren't dead yet. We used that window to charge everything. Flashlights, batteries, the Dremel, the laptop, even Dre's vape, though it felt stupid now. The apartment looked less like a home and more like a bunker. Tools and weapons stacked in corners, boxes of food and water rationed on the counter, a shotgun leaning against the radiator like it belonged there. As night fell, we cooked some rice over the electric burner and ate in silence. The food was bland but warm, and for a moment, I let myself believe we'd see another day just like this. Another day of power, walls, routine, but I should have known better. Around 9:30 the lights cut again, this time for good. Not a flicker, not a brownout, just instant darkness. And 5 minutes later, we heard the first explosion. It was distant, miles off, but powerful enough to rattle the windows. A low boom, like a thunderclap rolling sideways through the city. Then another, closer. A rising pressure in the air followed by a percussive shockwave that made the floor vibrate under our feet. Dre stood up and went to the window, but all we could see were clouds and a dim red glow rising behind the buildings across the highway. Then came the third one, this one louder, sharper. A flash lit up the southern skyline, and for a moment, we saw the shape of something in the sky. A falling piece of metal, maybe a helicopter or a drone, spinning end over end before vanishing behind the rooftops. Then the noise cut off again. No sirens followed, no jets, no announcements. Just a final rumble that slowly died out as smoke spread across the city like fog. Whatever was happening, it wasn't controlled, and it wasn't over. We didn't speak again that night. There wasn't anything left to say. We just sat in the dark, watching the skyline pulse with fire through layers of dirty glass. The cold was starting to creep in for real now. Without the radiator, the temperature inside the apartment was maybe 50 degrees, maybe less. Our breath didn't fog the air yet, but the floors felt like ice when I stepped barefoot to the sink, and the chill settled into my joints like it was trying to take root. When morning came, it came grey. The sky outside was overcast, a flat wall of pale light pressing down on everything. There was no sunrise, just a gradual shift from darkness to more visible decay. We opened the blinds just enough to peer through, careful not to let too much silhouette leak out. The city looked hollow, cars left in the middle of the street, shop gates half open like someone forgot to finish locking up, burned patches in the pavement where someone must have tried to torch something the night before. But it wasn't empty. Just before 10, we saw them, the first real sign of organized force since this all began. A column of military vehicles, at least one Humvee, a cargo truck, and 3 armored civilian pickups with mesh plating bolted to the windows, rolled down Laurel Avenue. They didn't drive like a convoy. They were moving fast, unpredictable, tires squealing as they turned corners without signaling. Each vehicle was packed. Soldiers, or maybe private contractors, wearing mismatched gear. One guy had a Kevlar vest and a ski mask, another in desert camo with a red armband. No insignia, no flags. They weren't here to help. That was clear from the first burst of automatic gunfire. We ducked the second it started. 5 or 6 short bursts, maybe from the pickup in the rear. We didn't see who they were shooting at, just the reaction. 2 of the figures in the lead truck stood up through the hatch and started yelling something at the buildings across the avenue. Then came the popping thumps, not as loud as the blast the night before. These were closer, tighter. We heard metal pinging against concrete, grenades maybe, but the weird part was the lack of follow-up. No enemy fire, no screams, just a few shots, a couple of grenades, and then silence. Dre asked me what they were using grenades for. I didn't have an answer. We hadn't seen anyone out there. Maybe they were clearing buildings. Maybe they were making sure no one followed. Or maybe they were just scared like everyone else and using heavy fire to announce themselves. In any case, we didn't stay at the window long. Later that day, around 2, we heard noise from within the building. Our building. It started with voices. Loud, fast. Someone was arguing, 2 or 3 floors below. A woman shouting. Another voice talking over her, trying to silence her. Then a third, male, deep and angry. It wasn't muffled enough to be behind a door. They were near the stairwell, or maybe in the hallway. Dre looked at me, already reaching for the shotgun. I tucked the revolver into my waistband and moved toward the door, slowly peeling the tape off the lock. I eased the door open an inch and peeked through the gap. The hallway on our floor was still empty, but the sound was clearer now, definitely coming from 6A, 2 doors down. The arguing woman was Miss Ortiz, mid-40s, lived alone, taught ESL classes out of her living room before everything shut down. She'd been quiet the past few days, blinds drawn, no lights. Now she was screaming something about not giving it up. A man answered back, maybe one of the older kids from 5B. His voice was low, threatening, cutting her off every time she tried to speak. Another figure stood near the stairwell, looking back and forth like he was acting as lookout. We watched through the crack, not stepping out, not interfering. That's when the third man stepped forward and raised something. We heard the shot before we registered what happened. One sharp report, not from a handgun, something louder, maybe a rifle, maybe a sawed-off. Miss Ortiz crumpled instantly, her body folding in on itself like her bones had just given out. She hit the floor and didn't move. Dre backed up fast and I closed the door without a sound, bracing it with my foot while we listened. 2 more shots rang out, then a crash, her door being kicked in. The voices laughed, said something we couldn't make out, then faded into her apartment. No one screamed, no one came to check. The building stayed silent, the air hanging thick with a fear that didn't need to be spoken. We sat against the wall for a long time after that, staring at each other, wondering if they'd start coming door to door. I wanted to believe they just wanted whatever she had, food, meds, water, but a part of me knew that even if they got it, it wouldn't be enough. Not now. When systems fail, and people realize no one's coming back to enforce rules, they start rewriting them. That evening, the sky went strange. The clouds glowed orange and pink at the edges, like someone had thrown gasoline into the sunset. We turned on the laptop again, this time using only battery, but the emergency map server was gone. Every page we tried was dead. The browser couldn't connect to anything, not even cached versions. The DNS servers had stopped responding. The last digital window we had into the outside world had finally gone black. At dusk, the lights flickered once. A quiet pop came from the breaker panel in the hallway. Then darkness, real darkness. The kind that settles in and doesn't let go. The hum of electricity in the walls, the glow from the hallway emergency lights, the soft pulse of charger LEDs, all of it gone. I flicked the switch twice just to make sure. Nothing. We waited for the lights to come back the way they had yesterday, but the hours passed, and nothing changed. By nightfall we knew. This time, it was permanent. Dre lit 2 candles and set them on opposite ends of the kitchen. I sat near the front door, revolver on my lap, listening. Somewhere down the stairwell, the voices from earlier had returned. Lower now, drinking maybe, laughing. The kind of laugh that sounds like teeth behind it. We didn't plan anything that night. We just watched the flame flicker and braced for whatever would come through the dark. Sleep was shallow. I must have nodded off sometime after 3, with my back pressed to the wall and the revolver clutched against my stomach. Dre stayed near the window, half awake, resting his chin on the shotgun stock. The apartment felt smaller in the dark, the walls closer. Every creak in the building felt louder, without the hum of electricity to hide behind. Just after sunrise, the silence shattered. The first gunshot came like a lightning bolt, sharp and close, probably 2 floors down. It was followed by the crash of something heavy being kicked in, and a woman screaming. Then, another shot. Then silence. For 5 seconds, maybe 10, the building held its breath again. Then came the second crash. Wood splintering, a voice barking orders. A man shouting something unintelligible. Furniture scraping tile. A third gunshot, this one quieter, possibly suppressed. Then a scream, short, male. They were moving floor to floor. I leaned toward the door and listened. It was clearer now. The thuds were boots on concrete. Doors opening, slamming. The sound of drawers being dumped and cabinets ripped from hinges. This wasn't just panic or looting. This was methodical, apartment by apartment. Take what's valuable, leave what's not. And if someone fought back, they didn't make it long enough to regret it. Dre stood beside me, already loading shells into the shotgun with steady hands. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. We both knew what was coming. Sooner or later, they'd reach 6B. Our door was reinforced, sure, but not invincible. The fridge, the chain, the deadbolt. It wouldn't hold if they really wanted in. If we waited for them to make the first move, we'd lose the only advantage we had. So we made a plan. We didn't have much time. We moved the fridge back again and cleared the entryway, then placed a thick piece of shelving at a diagonal behind the door to act as a pivot brace. Anything that pushed forward would meet resistance. Dre dragged Ruben's toolbox to the center of the room and set the shotgun across it. He would stand back, hidden behind the kitchen wall, aimed at the door. I'd stay closer, to bait them, revolver in hand. We tied a nylon cord from the inner doorknob to the radiator just under the living room window, tight enough that if the door got forced open quickly, it'd snap the attacker sideways. Not enough to stop someone serious, but enough to cause confusion. I stuffed the hammer into my waistband just in case. Then we waited. We didn't have to wait long. Just past 9, heavy boots pounded up the stairwell. We heard them pause outside 6A. One voice barked something, low and direct. Then a foot kicked the already broken door inward. Glass shattered inside. There was laughter. The man's voice again. Same one we'd heard shouting the night before. Confident, sure of himself. The kind of man who thought no one would dare stop him. Then the steps came closer. They didn't knock. They didn't call out. They just started pushing. Our door groaned. The shelf inside creaked but held. Then a stronger shove. A second man's voice cursed through the crack in the frame. Dre held his breath. I crouched low near the hallway wall, hand tight on the revolver. The cord pulled taut. The third push was full force. The door slammed open, snapping the cord and swinging in violently. The lead man stumbled inside, off balance. He was wearing a hoodie soaked in dried blood, some kind of belt rig, and a pistol in his hand. That's when Dre fired. The blast shook the walls. The man buckled instantly, his stomach blooming red, thrown backward into the hallway with a wet crunch. He didn't scream. He just collapsed and didn't get up. The second man rushed forward, slipping in the mess, but still tried to push through the doorframe. The shelf caught his shin, knocking him sideways. He fell hard. I heard his leg snap before I saw it, a brutal, hollow crack. He screamed and tried to pull himself up, but his knee had bent the wrong way and stayed there. The third man stepped into view, swinging a rifle toward us. But he hesitated, just for a second, maybe trying to identify which way the shot had come from. That hesitation cost him. I stepped out, raised the revolver, and pulled the trigger. The bullet caught him under the eye. He didn't fall right away. His body seemed to pause mid-motion, like it didn't understand it had been shut off. Then he slumped sideways, rifle clattering to the floor next to him. The hallway went quiet. We didn't move for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. The candle behind me flickered slightly. I stepped over the threshold and scanned both directions. No more footsteps, no shouting, just 3 bodies cooling in the corridor, blood soaking into cracked linoleum. Dre stepped out slowly, shotgun still raised. He nudged the man with the broken leg, who was wheezing through clenched teeth, not even trying to speak. He was already halfway unconscious. There was no point in finishing him off. We just left him there. The others didn't need checking. We dragged the bodies to the far end of the hallway, away from our door. Not to hide them, just to clear space. The smell had already started to rise. Burnt gunpowder, blood, sweat, and something worse. I didn't want it settling in the apartment. Once the hallway was clear again, we barricaded the door tighter than before, bolted the shelf in place, reinforced the lock with scrap metal. We didn't speak until we sat back down, sweat freezing against our skin in the cold silence. "That's it," I said quietly. "We can't stay here." Dre didn't argue. He just nodded. We both knew. The balance had tipped. The building was no longer neutral ground. Men like that didn't stop after one apartment. They'd regroup. And next time, it wouldn't be 3. We started packing immediately. Only what we could carry. Food, water, batteries, the revolver, the shotgun, and whatever tools might help if we got stranded. We planned to leave through the stairwell before first light, cross the avenue, and head toward the shipping yards. Dre said he heard a rumor from someone he passed 2 days ago that the Navy yard on the waterfront had been sealed early in the outbreak and might still be holding. It wasn't a plan, but it was movement. Staying still was no longer an option. We set the last candle on the windowsill that night and watched it burn low. Somewhere far off, past the skyline, we heard another blast. Not as close as the ones before. Duller, like something heavy falling in water. The wind picked up around midnight, blowing through broken glass from the apartment next door. The corridor behind us remained silent. The broken man in 6A had either crawled away or died quietly. I didn't sleep much. When I did, it was shallow and full of fragmented dreams. Places I used to live. Arguments that never happened. People I hadn't seen in years leaning over my bed with mouths too wide and no eyes. When I woke up, I wasn't sure what time it was. The air was freezing, and the only light came from the city beyond the blinds. Faint, natural, grey-blue. It was morning. Early. The kind of early where nothing is moving yet, and the cold makes your bones feel hollow. I stretched out my legs and sat against the wall, rubbing feeling back into my hands. Dre was already up, sorting gear into 2 piles, essentials and not essentials. He had the flashlight in his mouth, the shotgun across his knees, and was trying to fit cans of food into the tight straps of his backpack. We'd both agreed not to take too much, just what we could run with. We were almost ready when we heard the scream. It wasn't loud, not like the screaming from earlier days. It was close, wet. It came from down the hallway, right near the stairwell. The voice cracked halfway through, cutting short. Then came a series of sounds that made me freeze in place. Rhythmic gasping, thick and slow like someone trying to breathe through mud. Then slurping, a real animal sound. Mouth on skin, flesh against tile. Followed by a horrible chewing noise, deliberate and slow. We looked at each other, neither of us saying anything. Dre reached for the shotgun and moved to the door. I stood up slowly, revolver already in hand. I felt the weight of it more than usual. We pressed our ears against the door and listened. There was movement. Something was dragging across the hallway floor, not fast, not stumbling like in movies. It was heavier, feet scuffing the ground, knees maybe. The breathing got louder, raspy and wet, a sick rhythm to it. Then a sharp crack, like someone twisting a joint the wrong way, a deep grunt. The chewing stopped. Dre eased the door open just a few inches and leaned his head out. I crouched beside him, watching through the gap. We saw him. The one Dre had shot in the stomach the day before. The one who dropped before he even hit the floor. He was upright now, barely, slumped forward, arms loose, head tilted at an unnatural angle, like something had unhooked the muscles in his neck. His face was ruined, pale grey, lips dark with dried blood, eyes milky. His lower jaw hung open, and his tongue flicked slightly as he breathed. He was straddling the other man, the one with the shattered leg, the one we'd left gasping the day before. He was eating him, not like a person who's starving, not with desperation or frenzy, just methodically, pulling skin and tissue with his teeth and chewing like he was processing gum. There was no urgency, no hatred, no hesitation, just a task he was committed to. The broken-legged man wasn't even screaming anymore. He might have still been alive, but if he was, there wasn't anything left in him that could fight back. The third man, the one I shot in the face, was still crumpled near the wall. He hadn't moved an inch. No twitches, no signs of return, just dead. We closed the door slowly, carefully. My heart wasn't pounding, but my hands were numb, not from cold, from the quiet realization that everything we'd assumed, everything we'd told ourselves to make it through this, was wrong. The city wasn't dead because of panic. The infected weren't just sick. The stories weren't exaggerations. People were getting up again, after death, and they weren't coming back human. Dre sat on the floor for a minute with the shotgun across his legs, staring straight ahead. I felt something shift in my chest. Not fear. That had already settled long ago. This was something else. The hollow awareness that staying was no longer survivable. It wasn't just looters and raiders anymore. It was them, whatever they were. We didn't finish packing. We left half of it behind. Food, tools, a full jug of water. None of it mattered anymore. We had what we could carry, and the hallway was no longer ours. The sound of dragging got louder outside the door. We froze again. Then came a series of short, irregular knocks. Not from a fist, from something heavier, clumsier. The kind of sound a shoulder makes when it presses into a doorframe without understanding how to turn a handle. We backed away in silence, inch by inch, past the kitchen, past the window. The knocking stopped. Then one of the wooden boards on the hallway wall cracked. Just a single creak. We didn't know what direction it had gone after that. We decided to wait for first full light, maybe half an hour more. We didn't want to go into the stairwell blind, and we didn't want to guess at shadows in a building where the dead could be crawling out of hallways behind every door. By the time the sky turned from grey to pale blue, the temperature in the apartment had dropped another few degrees. Every breath felt damp and metallic, and the walls looked sick in the low light, yellowed from years of trapped steam and cigarette smoke. The place no longer resembled anything like a home, just four walls around a waiting grave. We packed light. I had my hoodie tied down with food tucked inside, half a dozen revolver rounds in a side pouch, and one of Ruben's screwdrivers wrapped in cloth where I could reach it fast. Dre had the shotgun slung across his chest, 3 shells in the tube, 5 more in his back pocket, and a small folding knife clipped to his belt. We didn't speak, just nodded once, dragged the fridge aside, and opened the door for the last time. The hallway outside was empty, but it wasn't clean. There were smears now, along the walls, on the floor, footprints and something dragged behind them. The third man we shot, the one whose leg we'd left broken, was gone. So was the corpse Dre had blown apart the day before. All that remained was a trail of thick, dried gore leading toward the stairwell. None of the doors on our floor had been closed properly. Most hung half open. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was cautious. We moved fast. Dre went first, sweeping corners, shotgun at low ready. I followed with the revolver out but lowered, eyes flicking between the floor and ceiling. Every shadow felt like it was watching. Every doorknob looked like it might turn. The stairs creaked under our weight, but we didn't slow down. We passed the 5th floor. A door hung open there too, its inside scratched with black streaks. A bloody handprint on the wall, a child's shoe halfway down the steps. We didn't stop. 4th floor was worse. Someone had tried to set a fire in the hallway and failed. A pile of charred clothes and insulation sat in front of one door, blackened but not burned through. The air stank of melted plastic and old grease. Still no sign of movement. By the time we reached the lobby, my knees were stiff and my mouth felt like it was full of dust. The front doors, those heavy reinforced double panels, had been torn open. Not unlocked. Torn. One hinge was gone. The chain Leone had installed was snapped, bolts pulled straight through the drywall. There were deep scratches around the frame, wider than fingers, wider than anything I wanted to think about. Light streamed in through the broken glass, casting long shadows onto the lobby tile. The barricade was gone. No sign of Leone. Not even his radio. Just empty soda cans and the shell of a shotgun shell wedged in a floor crack like a warning someone ignored. We stepped outside together. The street wasn't empty. At first, it looked like it was. The avenue stretched wide and still, blanketed in dust and garbage, and the occasional toppled bike. Smoke curled from a smashed car at the corner of 182nd. The wind carried soot. The buildings across the way had broken windows. Curtains blew in slow waves from the 3rd floor. Power lines drooped like dying vines between poles. Then I saw movement. One figure, halfway down the block, shambling between a fire hydrant and a rusted-out pickup truck. Then another, slouched against a mailbox like he'd collapsed mid-step. Then 3 more. Then 5. 10. They were scattered, moving without purpose, but not without direction. They turned slowly toward sound, toward light. toward the wind when it shifted. They didn't run, but they came. Dre grabbed my sleeve and pointed to the alley behind the corner deli, a narrow passage that snaked between the buildings and came out 2 blocks over, near a stretch of open lots. We moved, fast, quiet, keeping low, between abandoned cars and piles of toppled garbage bins. The infected didn't speak, didn't growl, just dragged their feet with that now familiar rhythm, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. One saw us. We locked eyes across 30 yards. He had no lips left. His teeth were grey, exposed. His chest moved with that ragged imitation of breathing, like his body didn't know it was dead. He raised his arms, slow, and let out a gurgling rasp that might have once been a voice. The others turned. Dre fired once, one clean shot that dropped the first one, center mass, but the thing hit the ground like it didn't notice it was supposed to stop. It squirmed and flailed, not dead, just disconnected. Another one started forward, then another. And we ran. Through the alley, over the trash bags, past a locked gate we had to vault with burning thighs, down a cracked sidewalk littered with half-eaten food and torn blankets. We didn't look back. Only when we turned the corner near an abandoned daycare and ducked into a partially collapsed laundromat did we stop. The infected hadn't followed. Not yet. They weren't fast, but they didn't stop. They moved like the weather. You didn't beat them, you got out of their way. We stayed crouched in that laundromat for maybe an hour, long enough for the city to go still again, long enough for the adrenaline to drain and our limbs to ache. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the toll of holding steel for too long with clenched fists. When we finally stood, I looked out at the stretch of empty lots and chain-link fences ahead. Beyond that, the waterfront. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and rebar was the Navy Yard Dre kept mentioning. Maybe it was burned out. Maybe it had been abandoned weeks ago. Or maybe someone had held the line. We didn't know. But it was the only direction left to go. The city was behind us, broken and bleeding. Our building, our floor, our walls, our door, was now just another part of it, another ruin.